there. What did you and your mom do?
She was sitting out on the front porch.
This porch?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there some chairs right over here?
They're rocking chairs.
Okay.
I pulled up in the driveway and I parked and walked up. I think the girls were out there at that time. I know they came out there at some point, but she immediately said, "We've been looking for your daddy and we don't know where he is."
She said that to you?
Mm-hmm.
You didn't bring up to her, "Hey, where's daddy"?
Not that I can recall. I just remember her bringing it up because I was like, I don't know.
Was that early in the conversation? Had you?
Yeah, it was like immediately once I got there.
Okay. Then what did you go do next?
Well, I started talking to her. And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" She was like, I can't find him." And I was like, "Well, where?" I mean, it wasn't unusual for them not to know where each other was at, but I was like, okay. And I kind of brushed it off. I was like, I wasn't worried about it. And so then she was like, "No, really, like..."
Did she seem nervous? Like
Not nervous, but she seemed concerned.
Okay.
And I don't know if the girls were looking for him or whatnot. I have no idea. She just said that she could not find him. And I was like, "What do you mean?" I didn't understand. A lot about that day I didn't understand. But it wasn't long after Scott came up. Again, you don't go on that property and not show up immediately. And he came up and I asked him, I said, "Have you seen Daddy?" And he was like, "No, I haven't seen him." And so then it just escalated into, it's all kind of a blur, but it escalated into, we need to find him. And
Did Scott say anything else that was odd or weird?
Well, I don't know if it was when I decided to search the house and just walk through it, or like, I don't know which one came first, or like, I know I called Chris, I know I called Emily, I know I called Angela, I know I texted him, I emailed him, I called him, and none of those nobody knew where he was. But at some point I decided, I was like, I'm going to go look in the house. And I started in the upstairs, but before I stepped foot in that house, Scott looked at me and said, "I'm going to go look for a missing gun."
He said that to you?
He said that to me. And I remember...
As you're standing here at this door right here, this green door?
Yes.
Okay. And he just like grabbed you by the arm and said, "I'm going to look for a missing gun."
He didn't grab me by the arm, but he just turned and he put his hand on the door and he said, "I'm going to go look for a missing gun." And I'm like... And I kind of I remember pulling back and I was like, "What does he mean?" And I looked at Mama and I was like, "What is he talking about?" And she was like, "I don't know." And so he went into the house. And
so he was the first one in the house before you went in there?
He walked in the door first. I don't know where he went, because when I went straight up the stairs. I looked upstairs, I looked on the middle floor, and then I went to the bottom floor. And then that's when I proceeded to go outside.
Did you go up these stairs?
Correct.
And that's just walking straight in the door?
Straight in the door.
And if you take a right here, is that the kitchen?
Correct.
Okay. And that's looking back out that door?
Yes.
And you went upstairs. What did you do upstairs?
Just looked to see if he was anywhere. There was a door that went to like an attic, like a walk-in attic. And I checked everywhere.
Okay. So this was the kitchen. Obviously there's no furniture or anything, but this is the general layout of the home at the time.
Correct.
All right. So where did you go next after going upstairs?
I just walked to the main level. I don't know if I walked in the master bedroom. That would have been to the right, straight back from there. And then I walked in the basement.
Where did you go in the basement?
Probably into my dad's room. That would have been in that hallway right there.
Going towards these doors here?
No, the other way.
The other direction?
His bedroom was there, and then he had a bathroom that was over there straight back too. I probably would have looked there, I assume, just to see if he was there, since it was his room, and there was the living room, and then I just walked straight into his office, because you could pass by the theater room, and I went into his office, and he wasn't in there.
Okay, so this thing they've got listed on this Thrasher 17, this workshop, that was his office?
Yes.
Okay. And nothing, when you walked down into the basement, did you see anything out of place?
No.
And because you'd been down there, I mean, how often would you go to the basement?
I mean, we were every time we were over there, we would probably most likely go down in the basement because my dad was always working in his office.
So when you were down there, did you notice anything, this looks like a bunch of very fine furniture. Did you notice anything broken?
Mm-mm.
Did you, what's underneath these candles appears to be glass fixtures holding up the candles.
Correct.
Anything out of place?
No.
Did you
Not that I
notice
recall.
any blood?
No.
Now, had you been there the weekend before, did you ever notice anything about your father being bit by a dog or anything like that?
Yes, when we walked into Jay Christopher's, my husband and I was on the right, he was on the left, and my dad was in front of us, and he was walking up the stairs, because it was like a few stairs to go up into Jay Christopher's, I believe, and it was an awful, like, purple dog bite on the back side of his leg, like right above that, whatever, I guess that tendon that is, and my husband said, "Damn, Gary, like, what happened to your leg?" He said, "That damn dog bit me," meaning Motley, her little black, her little terrier dog.
So Motley was a kind of an ankle biter.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yes, I don't like that dog.
For lack of a better term. But you saw with your own eyes this injury to your dad's leg.
Yes, it was bad.
And it was from the weekend before his death.
It was purple by the time I saw it, and red. It looked bad.
Okay.
Enough for us to notice it.
So you walked past this dining room. These pictures were taken on the day of the 5th. This is Thrasher 81. You walked past this dining room, and this is how it looked?
Yes, sir.
On that day? You notice anything broken or out of place there?
No.
This was your mom's room?
Correct.
Where was the mudroom in the house?
We just passed it. There was like the mudroom was the long kind of hallway, and it had a desk and cabinets, and then that was off of the mudroom, and it had the washer and dryer. My dad had like his cowboy hat hung up on the wall to the left there. And that was the mudroom, and then there was
This
a
is
pantry.
your dad's cowboy hat?
Yeah.
Okay. And this is Motley's bed?
Yeah, well, all the dogs' bed.
How many dogs lived in the house?
Too many. We had Motley, Lucy. One time we had what we called Elizabeth Taylor. She was a little teacup Shih Tzu. They had Luke, Leroy. They were the biggest white labs I've ever seen in my entire life. And then Scott had a Chihuahua. And I think that's all the dogs he had. I know he had some cats too, but the cats never came in the house.
Did your dad tell you where he was bitten by the dog?
For Motley?
Yes.
I mean, it was on the back of his leg.
Well, no. Where in the house? Where was he when it? Did he say?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So you never would have seen any of these droplets of alleged blood?
No.
And you went down these very stairs on this same day, yes?
And many times after that.
Walked past these floors?
I would not have been looking.
And the furniture would have been exactly like this on that day?
Yes.
Did Scott ever tell you that this was the drawer where he said the gun was missing from?
No.
Okay. Did you check for any missing guns?
No.
Let's go back to when he said that. He goes in the house. What did he do next?
I don't know what he did. I just know he said, "I'm going to go look for missing guns," and I was so taken back because our family doesn't do guns. My dad had like old shotguns that he kept in, whether my mother's, our grandfather's, they were family
kind of in
guns.
this picture above.
Yeah, that was like an old antique gun that belonged to my mother's side of the family. But my dad had like shotguns because he would, I don't know if he went like with his law partners or something, but they would go like dove hunting, I guess, and things like that. So I always remember, as long as I can remember, there were shotguns in like those big long zip up cases. But it's like, as far as like small guns, no.
No. So you never saw any in that house?
No.
Never saw any revolvers?
We would have never owned any.
So even back at y'all called it Hampton Hall? Mm-hmm. So you never saw a small snub-nose revolver at that house?
It was only shotguns.
Did Chris ever tell you he found a snub-nose revolver?
No.
Back at Hampton Hall in the 2012 era? Mm-hmm. Okay. Or Scott?
No.
Okay.
The only handgun that I knew of back in Hampton Hall was when my brother was in the Army. It was a black handgun, and he had gotten it, I guess, after he got in the Army. I don't know. That was the only one I ever remember seeing, ever.
Yeah. So you walked down here, and you knew Scott had been in the house, right?
Yeah.
And you didn't see any of these droplets of blood?
No.
I'm fast forwarding because there's one image I specifically want to ask you. It may be easier to go to the... Were you ever made aware that a bullet was found right there under that ottoman?
The only time I was ever aware of a bullet was during the preliminary hearing.
Okay. That's the first time you'd ever heard of that?
Correct.
And you don't know if that was... You didn't know anything about it?
No, and I would have never looked there.
So you never saw this bullet?
No.
Laying in the floor?
No.
Do you find it odd that there's nothing around that bullet?
Yeah.
I mean, nothing that would have caught your imagination. No blood, no holes in the chair, nothing. It's just this bullet laying next to a piece of carpet.
If you compare it to all your Netflix documentaries, no, it doesn't make any sense.
So you never saw that?
No.
Okay, so Scott went in the house first before anybody else.
Correct.
That morning. Then what did Scott do? What did everybody do?
I don't remember where he went. I know that I went out my dad's office, and you could walk down because I knew he was making the burn pile on like July 3rd because I remember Chris went over there and all of that, and that was known. And so I had walked down, and my mother came up shortly behind me, and I saw one stream of like smoke coming off of the top of it, and there was like one stick that was laying by the side, and I just picked it up and tossed it on there, and and she was there, and I was like, it's still like smoldering. She was like, yeah, it's gonna be hot for a while, and I was like, okay. And I turned around and looked up, and Scott was standing at the top of the hill, like where the driveway is, with both arms on his hips, just staring down at us. And at the time, I was just like, mental image, I guess, and I was just like, okay. So I walked the edge of the property because
there's a pretty steep hill there. Did you go all the way down that steep hill?
I didn't think it was steep, but I went down there. I mean, I had probably had sandals on, but I walked all the way down. I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking something happened to my dad. He's been out here working on the property, may have fallen out. Let's go look for him. So I'm searching everywhere, and I go walk that property line, and I go over the dam that's by the left of the pond if you're standing on that side. And I walked up to the barn, probably walked either through the barn or around the barn. I don't really remember.
Now, I ask you this. Do you ever remember around this time Scott saying anything about the placement of the tractor? Did he bring that up? Did you hear that?
No.
Okay. All right, go ahead. Where you walked?
Walked up there, and I was calling out his name, trying to find him. I was getting desperate at this point and hoping I would find him. And I just had this gut feeling that something was wrong. And I had turned and walked down the driveway, and I was standing right as the driveway dips, and Scott calls me.
On your phone?
On my phone. And I'm looking over the pond and kind of just standing there at the fence, and he goes, Amanda, like something to the tune of like, Daddy's in this burn pile. Like, I know what I've seen. I've been in Iraq. I know what burned bodies looked like. And I'm just sitting there on the phone going, what are you talking about? And he was like, there's something in this burn pile. And I was like, what are you talking about? And pure just denial, I guess. And either he hung up the phone or I hung up, but I immediately called Chad and I said, you need to get here right now. This is what Scott is saying, and you need to come get Cameron. You have to come get your daughter. And next thing I know, I don't know if he walked over. I mean, everything, your whole world stops. And he came over and grabbed me by the arm as hard as he could, and he got in my face.
Who are we talking about?
Scott.
Okay.
He got in my face and he screamed at me. He said, I know what I saw. I know what it is, Amanda. And I was just, again, going like, what? And next thing I know, he said he called the 911, paramedics, whatever, and I walk up to the driveway, and there's like a fork in the road.
I have to ask you this question, and I'll move on from this topic quickly. But you walked down to the burn pile earlier. And you and your mom looked at it together.
Briefly.
And neither one of you saw what you would believe to have been human remains.
Thank God, no.
But you say Scott was up behind you on the hill just staring at you both.
Yes.
Okay. So going back to when the paramedics arrived, what happened next?
I was standing in the driveway and my mom had walked up. And I was like, what is going on? She said, I don't know. She just kept saying, I don't know. And I was just in shock at this point. And next thing I know, fire trucks, paramedics, and all of this. And she just said, why is he holding them up at the end of the driveway? And I said, I don't know. I have no idea. And it felt like an eternity. And I refused to go over there. I didn't want to go over there. And this poor paramedic, I'll never forget him. He was standing there with a gurney, and he goes, I'm so sorry for your loss. And that was the first time anybody ever told me about my dad being dead. And I said, so you're telling me that my dad is in that burn pile back there? And he just looked at me in shock. It was just like, he couldn't say anything back. And Chris was sitting on the bed of his truck, just looking down at the ground. He didn't say anything.
He didn't say anything?
No.
And what was your brother Scott doing at that time?
I don't know. I guess they were over there, him and my mom. I don't know.
Did your brother, and I think I'm going to ask the judge after this question to go ahead and break here, because then we're going to go ahead and start talking about what happened after this day. But did your brother say anything else concerning at that time? And he'd mentioned a gun. Did he say anything else that resonates in your memory?
Which one, Chris or Scott?
Either one.
No, Chris, no.
What about Scott?
I don't think I talked to Scott much after that. I think he was off. I don't really recall. I really felt like every bone in my body was broken at that point. I remember talking to Hayes for a little bit and standing at the fence. And he could have told me I had purple hair and 5 eyes. I wouldn't have recalled. And I just kept going through my head of just like, if he's gone, he's like, our life has changed forever. And it was awful. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy.
I'm going to show you what has been previously marked as, I believe, bot song 4. Is this you?
Yes.
Were you aware there was a trail camera on the property?
No, not really.
Okay. And is this your mother?
Yes.
Okay. And that's bot song 5. And who is this?
Scott.
Is that also Scott?
Yes.
I'm going to ask you a question, and then I think we should probably go ahead and break before we move on to the next phase. Would it shock you to know that Scott Farris deleted. That's a picture of him backing away from the phone, from the trail cam after deleting the trail cam. At that very moment, as y'all are searching for your daddy.
Yes. It would shock me. We were looking for my dad. Why? I don't. Like, again, I didn't know that he had a trail camera. But that is concerning.
Judge, I think we should break.
It's here. So we'll break for lunch. We're going to take an hour, so we'll start back up at 1 o'clock.